2024, the Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program was created to collect and preserve the stories and experiences of Florida's veterans and to recognize the state of Florida's military contribution throughout our nation's history. Through recorded interviews, the Florida Veterans History Program Oral History Collection acts as a living archive of first-hand accounts to capture the details of military service and the voices, memories, and reflections of the Floridians who served. The Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program is operated by the Department of State, Division of Arts and Culture's Florida Folklife Program. Together, we are proud to ensure that Florida's military history is preserved, honored, and shared. My name is Julian Duncan with the Florida Department of State, Division of Arts and Culture, Florida Folklife Program. Today is October 10th. The time is 9:23 a.m., and I'm interviewing Robert Clery in Jacksonville, Florida. This interview is being conducted for the Major John Leroy Haynes Florida Veterans History Program and will be submitted to the State Archives of Florida and the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. Good morning, Mr. Clery. How are you today?
Greetings. I'm fine. And yourself?
I'm doing great.
Outstanding.
Glad to hear that. So, nice to be sitting down talking to you today. To begin this interview, will you tell me a little bit about when and where you were born and what you were like growing up?
Oh, yeah. Born in 1960 in Chicago, Oak Park, Illinois. My folks were musicians, so we traveled all over the place. Spent, a month here, 2 weeks here. Did that until probably like high school time, and then kind of got grounded in Las Vegas. Went to high school there.
Cool. And what led you to military service, and specifically the Navy? Was it a family thing? Was it?
Well, actually, my best friend joined the Navy, and he was a corpsman. And he would come back on leave and, tell wild tales and, always had money in his pocket. And at the time, I wasn't going anywhere really fast. I was working at a print shop, not a career move, but so anyway, that was kind of the impetus of it. It looked like a pretty sweet deal. So that's how I ended up going to see the recruiter.
Okay. And this was 1980?
Yep, 1980.
Right.
And I signed up on very short delayed enlistment. It was like a month, and reported to San Diego boot camp. Probably, it was the silliest time to go. I went like on the 4th of December, and because of the holidays, they didn't do much at the boot camp. So not until the 1st of the year.
Did you go home on block leave and then come back?
No, they just kept us there.
Sweeping and cleaning.
Yeah, just doing not a whole lot.
Oh, that doesn't sound fun.
No, but they're still feeding us.
Yeah, fair enough. You're getting paid.
Exactly.
So what was the boot camp experience like for you? I mean, do you remember any particular standout moments, and do you remember how it changed you as a person?
Sure. I mean, overall, it wasn't a bad experience at all. It, built the team. That's what they try to do is, mold a team and get everybody going in the same direction and indoctrinate it into the Navy. I was on the drill team, the crack rifle team, and so we got to wear silver helmets, and when we graduated, there's like a little parade, and we were in the parade with our rifles, kind of like a precision rifle thing, twirling them around and everything.
Cool.
So that was pretty neat.
Yeah, it's fun. And then what about your job training following boot camp? How did
Well, when I enlisted, I didn't enlist under any particular program other than what they called the subfarer program. And basically what that got you was guaranteed to submarine duty. Okay, so at the time I wanted to be a corpsman, but the wait was like 6-8 months. They didn't need corpsmen. So I came in as a subfarer. When I went to sub school in Groton, Connecticut, right after boot camp, hearing some of these old salts that have been in the Navy like 9-10 months, and particularly at Groton, Connecticut is like the home of the submarine force. So it's a big submarine base. I found out that I didn't want to go to a submarine as an undesignated person, because you would have ended up just chipping paint, and and then you have to try to get into a career field and apprentice like that. But so anyway, during sub school they offered the opportunity, if you were such and such a grade point average, you could choose from 4 different ratings. There was like a torpedo man, a personnel man, IC man, and a storekeeper. I chose storekeeper because mainly it deals with parts, logistics, and I had done that previously to joining the Navy. I did work at a car dealership for a few years as a parts guy, so it kind of was an easy fit. So from there, from sub school, I got the A school for storekeeper. So then I was rated as a storekeeper, and then I went to a submarine.
Okay. And what was your first submarine assignment?
That was on the excuse me, the Sam Rayburn, USS Sam Rayburn. It was a ballistic missile sub out of it was a 2-crewed submarine, the ballistic missile submarines. So I was on the gold crew, and while one crew's back in Groton training and preparing to take over the ship, the other crew is out with the ship on patrol. And then they've come into Holy Loch, Scotland at the time. We had a tender sitting there, and the submarines would tie up to it. And we'd do crew exchange there, and then that crew would fly back to Groton and have some time off, and then go to training and all that stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's not bad.
Yeah, what was life on a submarine like? Can you describe that a little
It's different. You can't be claustrophobic, that's for sure. And I guess you don't really think about it. I never did, really. It's just, on a ship. Yeah. Ship's a ship, a sub's a sub. Obviously, you don't see daylight or anything really other than the inside of the sub, but that didn't seem to bother me. And the only way you could tell the time was by the lighting. At night it'd be red lights, and then during the day we'd have regular white lights on.
Was it hard to sleep without I'm just thinking about the effect of light on sleep.
No, because you had your little rack with a curtain, so
okay.
You could get in there and sleep.
Okay. And how long would you spend at sea when you're out?
Well, those patrols normally averaged about 100 days out to sea. So it's like a little over 3.5 month cycle that you'd go through, and you'd go out and patrol in your little box, and be ready to receive a message from command authority to shoot your missiles, which you hope never came. Obviously, we might not be sitting here.
Yeah, this is 1980s. I mean,
yeah,
height of the Cold War.
Exactly.
What was the what was maybe your mindset on that? I mean, the Soviet threat, and I'm sure that was something that was talked about a lot in your training. What was your mindset on? Was that something that caused like anxiety at any point? Was that?
No, and I think most of the crew really didn't think in those terms. They were more concentrated on just operating the ship and not being detected. That was the main goal. Was because they would come out looking for you, the Russian or Soviet at the time submarines.
So let's talk about a typical day on a submarine. Can you kind of walk me through what a typical day would look like?
Sure. Most submarines would run on well, back then anyway, they did there was 4 feeding times: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then what they called mid-rats. Okay, so, and that was fashioned around the watch schedule. So a typical day is you'd get up, you'd go. Everybody had several jobs. So even though I was a storekeeper and issued parts out to repair things on the ship and stuff like that, I still had another job, and that was, at the time, I was a helmsman. So I would drive the submarine.
Oh, cool.
For my shift, which would be like 6 hours, 6-hour shift. Okay, and then after that, I'd get to go do storekeeper work and get some sleep, get something to eat. That would be a typical day. And then, yeah, really, that's about it. So it just depends on your rate. If sonarman would go and stand his sonar watch for 6 hours and then be off.
thinking about your storekeeper work, how did you keep track of or store or maintain equipment with so little space on a submarine?
Well, you had parts rat packed everywhere. So in the berthing compartments, there would be in the racks, the beds, there'd be lockers outboard, on the inside that, sometimes I'd have to go wake somebody up to get a part out, because it's in the locker. But we had parts everywhere,
Yeah,
uh,
just wherever you could fit them.
wherever you could fit them.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Just the same with the food, when you load up for a patrol, initially you're walking on food in the berthing compartment, these big number 10 cans, and because you got to pack so much food, we'd line the deck with cans, and so you could kind of tell where you were at in the patrol cycle as the cans went away, right? Oh, got half the cans are gone. We're about half there.
Wow.
So,
What about teamwork, camaraderie, trust in an environment like that?
well, you got to have it. That's for
Yeah.
sure. And to be honest with you, in all the submarines I've been on, and I've been a few, everybody seemed to get along. You'd have a few little headbutts here and there, some struggles, personal issues between people, but it never really got too far.
Yeah.
And because you're counting on that other person to help in case, fire, flooding, which are, bad things on a submarine. So everybody got along pretty well, actually.
Something that struck me at I got the opportunity to tour the USS Orleck yesterday,
Oh, great. Yeah.
and something that struck me was they were showing the fire equipment and
Oh, yeah.
talking about every sailor being trained for
Trained as
firefighting.
Yeah, you're a fireman.
Yeah, that's cool. That's so cool. What is the protocol on a submarine for
Well,
that kind of incident?
and I've been through them all. I've been through flooding, I've been through fire,
Oh man.
and it's terrible. It's scary as hell.
Yeah.
And fire is the worst, okay? Because there's nowhere for the smoke to go,
Oh God.
right? You're in a tube. So if you have a fire, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to bring the submarine up to be able to stick up the mast and recirculate the air and get all the smoke out. But there's special equipment on a sub that you might not have on a surface ship. They have a thing called the EAB, which is a mask that with a like 15-foot hose, and all throughout the submarine there's places to plug in for oxygen or air, and so you're cumbered by that. If you're trying to fight a fire, you got this EAB thing on. You can only go a few feet, and then you got to plug in again, and yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's another thing I'm thinking about. You mentioned having to surface. I mean, because you got to get
Yeah.
air on the ship. But one of the major, things you guys are thinking about while you're out on these patrols is not being detected. Is that
Exactly. So it's a double-edged sword, really.
Yeah.
You got to be careful.
Wow.
So luckily, nothing too tragic. I was on one submarine, the Blueback, and I was standing watching sonar, and I hear fire in the engine room, and boom, you hear this big boom, and the whole ship went dark. Okay. So
It's got to be dark too.
yeah,
You're
dark.
underwater.
Yeah. I mean, all the power went out. And Blueback was a very old submarine. It was our last diesel submarine. And this was probably in 86, 87. And so we had to emergency blow the ballast tanks and surface. And we floundered for like 3 days with no power, and they had to send out a ship to tow us back in.
Gosh. And that could be, depending on where you are in your patrol cycle. I mean, you may not be near a port.
Oh, correct.
to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
a
You
tender.
might be stuck out in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
Right.
Do you know about where you were when they had to send the ship out to tow you back in? How?
Oh, yeah. Because you could always walk up into the control room, and they have the charts out, so you can see where you're at.
Were you like just middle of the sea, or were you kind of close to a
No,
port?
we were close to the coast of California,
Okay.
because again, the age of the boat,
Yeah.
we were kind of restricted for how far we could go out.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
I think you told me when we talked prior that you served on ballistic missile, and you called them boomers,
Yes.
and then also fast attack
Yes.
subs. So those are two different types of
Yes.
subs. Can you
Yeah.
describe this a little bit and
Sure.
differences of being on each of
Oh
them?
yeah. Well, the ballistic missile sub. Currently, we have the Ohio class. Okay, and those are stationed in Kings Bay, Georgia, up the street here.
Oh, cool.
And then you have on the West Coast, Bangor, Washington. Okay. Four of the oldest ones were converted to what they call SSGNs. So what they did is they took out the missile tubes for the ballistic missiles and they put in Tomahawk launchers. So those four submarines are for special operations. They can take SEALs, stuff like that.
Cool.
And they can shoot off, I think they carry like 154 Tomahawks. So anyway, so back to your basic question though, you have your boomers that have the ballistic missiles, okay? And then you have fast attacks, such as the Topeka here. A fast attack is just that. It goes out and hunts submarines, okay? So the boomer is supposed to remain undetected. The fast attack obviously wants to remain undetected, but its mission is to go out and find other adversaries, if you will, other submarines, surface ships, so on and so forth. So that's the big difference.
Is there a difference in your job on one or the other?
No,
or is it
they're
more or less
identical. You know,
Okay.
you still got your parts everywhere.
Yeah.
So.
And you know, I don't know. This is maybe like less of a question and more like me expressing wide-eyed whatever. But
Sure.
you know, the idea of being on a vessel with that kind of firepower, particularly nuclear firepower, like to me,
Oh,
that
God,
just
yeah, I
that's
know.
just mind-blowing to me.
Destroy the world, really. You know, and you'd have drills where you would practice shooting the missiles, and actually, every so many years, you have to actually test fire a missile. They actually just did like 4 missile shoots off the coast here.
Wow.
In September. Okay, so, and I was the helmsman one time driving the ship when we shot our missile. It's called a DESO, demonstration and shakedown operation. And you're basically off the coast of California and you shoot your missile and it goes down tracked by Bermuda, and then you know they track it all the way till it falls. The little MERBs fall in, but you know they're dummies. But I was driving the submarine and they shot the missile, and the submarine immediately drops like 3 to 4 feet. It's like because all that weight of the missile leaving, and then it takes a moment for the water to flood in to the tube. So yeah, it's wild.
Does it go back up when the water floods
No,
in?
we have a compensating system.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of automatically takes care of that water.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild, but I'd hate to be shooting them for real.
Yeah.
Because you know it's going to be kind of ugly.
Could say that.
To say the least, yes.
You told me your longest patrol was it 130 days underwater?
127.
127 days underwater.
Yeah. That was on a fast attack.
Okay. And what was the purpose, the length of that mission, and maybe some unique challenges? I mean, you're already packing things everywhere you can.
Oh, sure.
An extra month is.
Oh yeah, and that was rough because we actually ran out of some food.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it was ugly. For breakfast, you'd have a piece of toast and a slice of bologna, and that was it. But yeah, the other thing these fast attacks do is they do what they call spec ops.
Okay. Special
operations. So you might have some SEALs on board. You might be going to watch some other Navy's activities, if you will. So this long stay underwater for me was during a spec op, which I can't really get into what we were up to, but that's why we ended up staying down under the water for so long.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they do some wild stuff on these submarines.
Yeah, I
Sneak into harbors and take pictures underneath ships.
Oh, cool.
Called underhulling, you know, because you can, it's wow.
That's
crazy stuff.
Yeah. I had another.
It'll come to you.
Well, I'm just it doesn't seem as interesting now
Oh,
as that. And so
oh, okay.
I always want to ask you to just say more about, if you can, about some of the spec ops.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, the great thing about being in the Navy is you get to go all kinds of different places. So I've been in almost every sea, Pacific,
Uh-huh.
Atlantic, Indian Ocean, every ocean, Arctic, been underneath the Arctic, North Pole, all that stuff. But yeah, Spec Ops, again, it just depends on what you're up to. Um, can't really talk about it too much, unfortunately. Yeah, it's still even today,
Yeah,
and that was a long time ago.
that's cool. That's really cool. All right. Well, I guess just a little bit more on the day to day. I've asked you a couple questions on day to day, but did you have any kind of like, do you have any funny stories or games you would play or anything you would do to kind of
Uh,
break up the
yeah.
monotony of it?
The funnest thing is when there's some certain ceremonies that take place on surface ships and submarines, such as when you cross the border or not the border, the international date line. If you're up underneath the Arctic Circle, that's called Blue Nose, Shellback. Okay, so when they have one of those, we had one on it was the Topeka, and we became golden shellbacks. So we crossed the equator and some other point, I forget what it was. But what they do is they save up food for a few days in garbage, and they turn the mess hall, they line it with plastic sheeting, um, and basically you have to swim through this garbage, and it's everybody's cheering you on and all. And then they get one of the larger persons on the submarine to be King Neptune, and he's sitting up there and he's got his belly smeared with vinegar and peanut butter, and there's a cherry in his belly button that you have to get out with your mouth. Yeah, anyway, it's a lot of fun. And then usually, because you're covered with grease, they pull the fuses out of the water heaters, so you got to take an ice cold shower.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
That's fun.
So did a few of those. Had some good port calls too.
Yeah, let's talk about this. What's I mean, one of the things you're doing in the Navy is travel a lot. I mean, you get to
Oh
go all
yeah,
over the world.
exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
what kind of ports? What were some of your favorite port calls? Where were some of the favorite places you went, and what'd you do on those?
Sure. Well, usually on boomers you don't get a port call, but fortunately we got one time, and we got to pull into Bremerhaven, Germany, and that was pretty cool. And so then me and a few other fellows rented a car and went into Bremen, Germany, and toured and just had a great time.
Cool.
And that was that one. And then we pulled into Australia. Uh, that was a lot of fun. I mean, the first thing, a lot of you do, you go to hit the bars, right? Have a few drinks and all that stuff, loosen up. But so Australia was lovely. We pulled into Rota, Spain. Where else? God, my memory's going. Spain, Australia, Hong Kong.
Hmm.
Wild place, Hong Kong.
Oh yeah,
Oh God.
what's wild about it?
Well, the streets are just packed with people, and the food is just so exotic. You can there'll be like a big um, barrel, on a street merchant with a big barrel, and he's got like live eels in there that you can buy to eat. And it's like, oh, all kinds of wild stuff like that. So, yeah. And then, Phuket, Thailand.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, nice place. Yeah.
How much time do you usually get on port call?
Oh, usually about 4 to 5 days.
Okay, enough time to see the place a
Yeah,
little bit.
so if everybody gets a chance to get off the ship and, get away from it for a little bit,
Yeah, that's cool.
it's not bad.
I want to zoom out just a little bit, because we mentioned a couple different subs. So
Yeah,
can you kind of walk through what subs you were on and their timeframes?
sure. Well, again, started on the Sam Rayburn. That was in the 80s, like 81 to 84. After that, I went to a submarine squadron on the staff for a couple of years. And then after that, I went to the USS Blueback, which is that old diesel boat I was telling you about earlier. And I was on there for about 4 years, made chief petty officer there. And then from there, I went to another submarine squadron. And then I got commissioned as a supply corps officer. And from there, I went to the Topeka. And previously, while I was at the submarine squadron, if somebody gets sick and they can't go on patrol or something, then sometimes the squadron personnel have to go ride on the sub. So I did that several times. Did the William H. Bates for 2 months. I did the Salt Lake City for 3.5 months. So there's those subs. Topeka was my last submarine. And then as a supply corps officer, you can only do the submarine thing once. So I did that. And then after that, for sea duty, I need to go to the surface ship. So I figured the biggest thing to go to is a carrier. So I went to a carrier. First one was the Kitty Hawk out of San Diego. I was on there a few years. And again, it's funny to hear people complain on the carrier that there's no room coming from submarines. It's like, really? Nothing but room, tons of room. But did that, and then some more shore duty, got stationed in London for 3.5 years. That was great. Loved that. The kids loved it. My kids loved London, going to school there and everything. And then did another carrier, the Kennedy, here out of Mayport. Even went to an aviation squadron. I went to VP 30 as their material officer. So I've really been in just about every surface, subsurface, and aviation. So that's pretty cool. And then did a tour as what they call the detailer up in Millington, where the Bureau of Personnel is. And the detailer is the guy that you interface with to find out where you're going to go be stationed next. And that detailer cuts your orders, and, gets it all set up. And so I did that for a few years. That was pretty interesting work.
Yeah.
Getting, helping people with their career, getting them in the right place, stuff like that.
What, I think when we talked before, you told me you made chief petty officer pretty quickly, and then, of course, as you mentioned, went on to commission as a limited duty officer. What do you think contributed to that kind of success professionally?
Well, the LDO program is set up for, again, you don't need college. Although nowadays, most people have college. Most enlisted people even have like an associate's degree, or they're working on one. But it's still available to an extent. For the Supply Corps LDO program, it's changed now where you can only advance to lieutenant, and then you have to either become a regular Supply Corps officer or revert back to being enlisted. But, the program in and itself, basically the key ingredients are obviously very good service, superior service. You need to become a technical expert in your field. Those are the two main things, and then your aptitude for officer-related duties. So,
can you think of a particularly challenging experience and how you solved it?
Yeah, we were on a spec op once, and I was the diving officer of the watch. And we were out, I'll just say spying, I won't tell you who. And the diving officer of the watch sits in the control room, and he has the helmsman and the stern planesman working for him to keep the submarine level, and at certain depth and all that stuff. And so, but the CO was kind of a nut, and he gave me an almost impossible depth to keep, 52 feet plus or minus like an inch. Okay, you're talking a submarine that's 365 feet long, and it weighs a lot. But anyway, he would be breathing down my neck, and I'd be, trying to keep us there. And there's a camera on the periscope so you can see. And, you stick the periscope up, and talk about sweating bullets. We're in the middle of all kinds of bad people, you know, and if we would have come up on the surface, then that would have been very bad, right? Yeah. So that was the hardest 6 hours of my life, was him breathing down my neck and trying to keep the boat at 52.5 feet.
Wow.
But we did it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, yes.
Well, and you know, what was your mindset? I mean, was it being like, I'm thinking of like, what was your mindset and your approach to managing that situation? Was it just a matter of like stress management? Was it a matter of?
Well, it was stress management and it was team management primarily, because you know, you're working as a team there, right? I got the helmsman, and then I have the chief of the watch, and his job is to move water around to keep the, you know, and as a team, we kind of all approached it, and you know, a lot of discussion while we were there doing it to keep things on an even keel and going the way we wanted it to go and keeping the depth. So, but yeah, I mean, a lot of stress management in that particular one, but.
Yeah, working under pressure.
Yeah, very much pressure point. But you know, the officer of the deck had the same thing. He, you know, he's in charge of everything overall. I mean, obviously the captain's there as well, but you know, could get real ugly if you broach. That's called broaching when you come up like that. So anyway, we survived.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
What was it like to transition from being an NCO to being a commissioned officer? What was the transition like?
It was kind of strange to begin with, you know, because you're an ensign, and in the Navy as a whole, you know, ensigns are like really junior people, right? But the LDO ensign is not. You know, he's got at least 10, 12 years in, maybe longer. And so that was kind of the mindset you have to deal with some of the more senior officers, you know, is that they don't treat you like a regular ensign, as it were. Yeah, I mean, on a submarine, as the supply officer, you're a department head. So, you know, you're equal with the engineer and the navigator and all that. And those guys are like lieutenant commanders. And here I was, ensign, lieutenant JG, but on the same level as them. And, you know, I'd have to assert myself sometimes with the lieutenant commander about how things were going to happen in the we're going to do it the right way, we're not going to do it the wrong way, right? When they wanted to get some parts or something like that.
Did you find most of them were pretty receptive because of your expertise, or did you get some pushback periodically?
Very little pushback. Yeah, because you know, if they know your background and they know you're not just some right out of the Naval Academy ensign or something like that. So yeah, I didn't have any real problems.
Good.
But it is a different mindset. You got to get, you know, more of a leadership thing.
Yeah. How did your perspective on leadership develop over? I mean, I would place that in your days as a chief petty officer and then through being a commissioned officer. How did that develop for you?
Well, again, because some of my assignments, you know, on a submarine as a supply officer, it's you, and you're in charge of the cooks, the messmen, and the storekeepers, which are now called logistics specialists. So you don't have a very big group of people that you're managing. So a lot of that time, you know, I was still doing hands-on stuff with them, okay? Whereas a regular supply officer, if you will, an ensign, lieutenant, probably wouldn't be doing that, right? They'd be just kind of staying away and letting those, but I was more hands-on, which I think in a leadership position helped with my enlisted guys, because they could see, well, you know, he can do it, why can't I, you know, right? So, and then as you get more senior, you know, it develops, because you're ending up managing more people. So, yeah.
you have any particular interactions with an individual that stand out to you as kind of a moment of like maybe you applying your leadership philosophy or developing your leadership philosophy
Let's think about that one. Yeah.
or testing it?
I'd have to say that I had a good friend who was the XO on the Topeka, and unfortunately, we had a very difficult CO to work with, and the XO kind of took me under his wing, and because I would be butting heads with the captain, because he wanted to do some stuff that we really shouldn't be doing. But yeah, he helped me quite a bit, and I learned a lot from him from a leadership perspective on how to deal with people and manage issues like that. So nice guy.
Well, let's go ahead a little bit. You had talked about being on an aircraft carrier,
Yeah.
and what did supply operations on a large ship like that look like compared to doing that kind of work on a sub? I mean, you've got more space, but you've also got a lot more people to
Oh gosh,
a lot more
yes.
moving parts.
Yeah. So on an aircraft carrier, there's usually so 9 to 10 supply officers. They're led by a commander, who's the supply officer, and then the assistant is a lieutenant commander, usually, something like that, and then a bunch of lieutenants and stuff like that. But you might have, when you're deploying, you might have a department of 600 people, quite a few people, and obviously you have quite, you're doing everything. You're doing the mail, you're doing the ship store, you're doing the laundry, you're doing obviously all the food prep, and you got hazardous material, you got the storekeeper part, the logistics, all the parts. You got to have aviation parts, you got to have aircraft carrier parts, if you will. So it's quite a different thing from a submarine, where submarine's kind of like independent duty for the officer. You don't really have anybody to go to with a supply problem. You have to figure it out yourself. Whereas on a carrier, you got a lot of experts there, seasoned veterans, as it were. So a lot of challenging personnel issues with a group that big, and a lot of junior personnel, and they would get into trouble, some of them, so you'd end up having to go to, are you familiar with what captain's mast is?
I've heard the term.
It's non-judicial punishment. That's where you go in front of the captain of the ship, and he'll meter out his judgment, and he can fine you, he can put you in the brig for a few days.
Article 15 level kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. It's informal, formal, goes in your record. It's not a career killer, but it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got exposed to that a lot on the carrier, because you got just so many people, and people get in fights and have all kinds of things going on.
Yeah. Two questions actually that I want to highlight from the section. So I'm curious about technology, inventory systems, processes, stuff like that over from the 1980s into the 2000s, over the course of your career. What kind of changes did you see, or similarities did you see?
Yeah. No, I tell you what, back in the 80s, everything was manual. You had paper cards, inventory cards. So you'd have your stock number on there, and it'd say how many you had and where it was located. And if you issued it, you'd have to go in and pull this little card out and write on it, very manual. So you'd have a big deck of cards. Hey, the lights are back on. Big physical deck of these cards, and you'd have a thing called a COSAL, which is a coordinated onboard shipboard allowance list, big volumes of books, and those would tell you what you needed to carry on the submarine to support all the different systems. So you had to try to keep up with that. It's all manual, all the changes were manual. And then in the early 90s, we started transitioning to desktop kind of computer situation, and there was some ad hoc thing called, what was it called? MSUP, I think it was, which tried to automate, if you will, part of the process. You still had your cards, but You know, you could do some of your ports and all that other stuff on there. And then probably mid-90s, late 90s, we finally kind of got more automated. So nowadays, it's completely automated. You're on a laptop, you're on a desk computer, all your inventory's in there. You can do all your transactions, all your reporting, all the changes. You know, because if they come in and change a piece of equipment on the ship, then the parts that you had for the old piece of equipment you probably don't need, so you need to take those off, right? And then you got to get the new parts for the new thing. So constant toing and froing there.
Mm. And then in the later part of your career, you ended up in Pensacola.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that time in your?
Yeah, that was an interesting tour. That was kind of my twilight tour, if you will, because for me, as an LDO supply officer, I was a commander, there was only 8 of us in the whole Navy. Okay, there was 1 captain in 06. So promotion-wise, there was no way for me to make captain, okay? And nowadays, they've actually done away with it for the Supply Corps LDOs. You can't go that high as an LDO. So I saw the writing on the wall, obviously. I wasn't going to make captain. So I got that tour after coming from the Middle East tour. So I got to kind of choose a nice tour after spending a lot of time in the sandbox as a sand sailor, supporting the Gulf War and all that crap. But that was a great tour. I was the only active duty guy there, and I had like 100 civilians that worked for me. And we had several. I was a supply officer for NAS Pensacola, the air station. I also was for another station called Corey Field. There's like 5 stations around there, and I was the guy for all of them. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Any standout experiences? I'm thinking 2010 Gulf oil spill response. Was that something you all were a part of? Or
Oh yeah, definitely. Because that happened when I was there, and so yeah, a lot of integration with the host command, which was FLC, Fleet Logistics Center, Jacksonville. A lot of liaisoning with them, would send in material supply to support the cleanup effort, stuff like that. That went on for a few months, quite a while, but that was interesting work. You know, you kind of felt like you're helping out.
Yeah,
a
it
bit.
felt rewarding.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the term being a sandbox sailor. I want to
Yeah.
revisit that for a second, if that's
Sure. Well, because of the war that went on for so long, you know, the Army and the Marines were running out of people. They needed a break for their people. So, in layman's terms, basically, Department of Defense said to the Navy and the Air Force, you need to start sending some people over here to help, okay? Or we'll cut your budget. So, they call them, I can't, memory is really bad these days, but anyway, you'd get selected for like a year tour, and you'd be in Afghanistan, Iraq. I got selected to go to Kuwait and be the chief of staff at the Central Command's operation and distribution center. It's in Kuwait. Prior to going there, you get to go get infantry training with the Army. So I got to go to Fort Jackson up in South Carolina, and no lie, you're an infantryman. You get 80 pounds of armor and gear, and you learn how to shoot a gun, you know, and you get issued a gun, all that stuff. So that was quite an interesting change from the Navy, you know, to go into that like combat stuff. And so when I worked for an admiral over there, I was his chief of staff, and he liked to go visit, you know, all the spots that we were supporting, forward operating bases and stuff like that. So I got to go to such lovely places as Afghanistan and Iraq, and you know, for visits and stuff like that. Yeah. So very interesting.
How did what was it like working with the other services? That kind of
it's cool. Yeah. You know, at our distribution center was we had probably about 80 people from Marines, Air Force, everybody got along really well because they were all logistics people.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So it was all like-minded people, all working, to get the equipment where it needed to be
Yeah.
to support the warfighter.
Well, and I'm thinking about that time period and supporting two different wars at the same time.
Hmm.
Somewhat geographically close, but there's Iran in between them,
Oh
a
yeah,
very
yeah.
large country, in between the two, and not a friendly country. I mean, you guys must have had some very unique challenges,
Oh God, yeah.
in the supply and logistics region.
Yeah, keeping, either we were flying the stuff in or convoying it in, and then you'd have to arrange for safe passage, in places. It was quite a lot of people involved to get that stuff where it needed to be.
Yeah, and you're working at a pretty high level at this point,
Yeah.
in terms of rank structure and everything. What is one challenge you can point to and how you all approached it?
Let's see here. Bada bing, bada bing. I can't really recall a particular one. They're all challenging, right? Yeah, I can't really recall one.
Okay.
Sorry, Julian.
No, no, that's fine. I think the just overall, you know,
Mm-hmm.
challenges you mentioned and some of the ways, that's great. I would love to talk about that for longer, but I know we need to start wrapping up. So, can you tell me just a little bit about what you do here at the USS Orleck Museum?
Certainly. Um, I got involved. A friend of mine was involved with the Orlick, and basically a few months after it got here, he finally strong-armed me into showing up, and I did, and I liked all the group that was working there, and started chipping paint and doing renovation work like that, and then the need arose for someone to be their supply officer. So obviously I was kind of ideally suited for that. Um, so I stepped up into that position, and so now I support them by acquiring everything we need to maintain the ship, renovate the ship. Uh, yeah, just it's great. I love it.
Yeah.
It keeps my hand in play, because I'm fully retired now. So you got to have something to do, and that's great.
Something that struck me about visiting the ship was the way that, on the one hand, like you're walking through, the decks of the ship and everything, you're walking through a piece of history,
Oh
right?
gosh, yeah, yeah.
Which is so cool. But then you also like you all are very active about keeping like building new exhibits and building new
Oh
ways
yeah.
for public engagement with that history. And
Hmm.
what does that mean to you? What is history and the relationship with it that you all foster?
Oh, I think that's great. It's trying to teach, the generations coming up about, the Navy and its traditions. And, the Orlick is a storied ship. It's very highly decorated. We're lucky to have it,
Mm.
actually. It's the only one in Florida, right? Um, but I think everybody that works there kind of has the common goal of, one, making it better, coming up with new ideas to, showcase it to the public. Um, I think our big worry is it'd be nice to have more support from the city,
Mm.
which, luckily the state has been supporting us, but the city hasn't been very good about it. Hopefully that will change in the future.
Mm. And looking back over your military career, you work
Hmm.
in history preservation and some of the things we talked about today. If you had a piece of advice you could offer to a young person, what is something you tell them?
Well, I would just tell them to work hard, know your rating, if you will, your specialty, do the best you can. And the Navy still provides a whole bunch of opportunities, for advancement. You can get to college. Um, you have a retirement, which is, kind of not not many retirement systems out there anymore, right?
Yeah.
So, you still get a pension, something like that. So it's just a wonderful way to go. Uh, you don't have to stay out, 20, 30 years, but even just coming in for 4 or 5 years, it gives you a good foundation. You get a lot of benefits just from that short period of time.
Great. Is there anything in this interview that we've not covered that you'd like to talk about?
No, I'm pretty good.
Okay.
It's been fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've learned a lot. I really enjoyed this. So thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your service.
Oh, too kind. It was a quick 32 years. I was just getting the hang of it.
Yeah.